Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
News is breaking like 5 seconds to showtime. So here's wait, no, this is crazy. I mean, we're going nuts here. But Adam Schiff is on the TV right now, and he is summarizing the report that was released by the House Intelligence Committee. It will be voted on tomorrow and then sent over to Judiciary. I could just give you a shorthand that there are two basic articles that look like they will be the focus of articles of impeachment. There is an obstruction of justice with a list of all the witnesses that Trump blocked, subpoenas blocked, etc. And then there is the bribery of Ukraine. So let me play for you Adam Schiff right now, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, his impeachment report. He's laying out the evidence of the president's misconduct.
It was an enormous task, and I want to begin by acknowledging the great work of the great and late colleague of mine, Elijah Cummings. We continue to be inspired by his legacy and guided by thoughts of his integrity and the great moral clarity that he always showed in his work. I also want to thank my colleagues, Chairman Engel, Chairwoman Maloney, for their tremendous work as well. This report chronicles a scheme by the President of the United States to coerce an ally, Ukraine, that is at war with an adversary, Russia, into doing the President's political dirty work. It involves a scheme in which Donald Trump withheld official acts, a White House meeting, as well as hundreds of millions of dollars of needed military assistance in order to compel that power to deliver two investigations that he believed would assist his reelection campaign. And I want to underscore, first of all, just how important that White House meeting was to Ukraine. Ukraine has a new reformer as its president, President Zelensky. A meeting with the most important patron of Ukraine, the President of the United States, in the Oval Office carries enormous significance, both to the people of Ukraine, but as equally important to Russia, that the United States has Ukraine's back in its conflict with a nation which invaded its territory. The military assistance is also absolutely essential. As President Zelensky goes into negotiations with Vladimir Putin, the fact that the United States is providing substantial military assistance approved on a bipartisan basis by Congress is enormously important. The withholding of that aid, even for a period of time, sends a disastrous message to friend and foe alike that the United States does not have the back of its ally. So these were things that Ukraine desperately wanted and needed. At the same time, there was something President Trump desperately wanted and believed that he needed, and that was an investigation that would damage the rival that he feared apparently the most, Joe Biden, as well as an investigation into a debunked conspiracy theory that it was Ukraine, not Russia, that interfered in our last election. Now, that conspiracy theory, which is often summarized or characterized by the term CrowdStrike, that conspiracy theory is a Russian narrative. That is a conspiracy theory put out, promulgated by Vladimir Putin to deflect attention away from Russia's interference in our own election and to try to drive a wedge between the United States and the nation of Ukraine. So that's what the president wanted, these two sham investigations, one into Joe Biden, also debunked and discredited that sham investigative theory, but also into this idea that Ukraine interfered in our election, not Russia. And he was willing to sacrifice the national security of the United States by withholding military aid and diplomatic recognition in the form of that White House meeting in order to get what he wanted. That scheme, however, was discovered because, among other things, a courageous person stepped forward and blew the whistle, but also because Congress announced that it would investigate the matter. Once we began our investigation and once it became clear to the President and to the White House that this was going to become public, this scheme was going to become public, only then did the President of the United States release the military aid. And as for that White House meeting that Ukraine so desperately sought, that has still not happened to this day. Now, what does this mean for Americans? Why should they care about what the President did vis-a-vis Ukraine? Why should they care indeed about Ukraine? First of all, this is not about Ukraine. This is about our democracy. This is about our national security. This is about whether the American people have a right to expect that the President of the United States is going to act in their interests, with their security in mind, and not for some illicit personal or political reason. So Americans should care deeply about whether the President of the United States is betraying their trust in him, betraying that oath that he took to the Constitution to protect our country and defend its institutions. So we should care about this. We must care about this. And if we don't care about this, we can darn well be assured the President will be back at it doing this all over again, because indeed he already has. First, there was the invitation to Russia to interfere in our last election. Hey, Russia, if you're listening, hack Hillary's emails, and indeed later that day they tried to do exactly that. But then there was the use of this official power to compel another country, Ukraine, to interfere in the 2020 election. And even after our investigation began, even after the impeachment inquiry began, there was President Donald Trump out on the White House lawn, once again making it abundantly clear that he wanted Ukraine to investigate the Bidens. And what's more, he wanted other countries to interfere in our election as well, and that China should also investigate the Bidens. This is the result of a president who believes that he is beyond indictment, beyond impeachment, beyond any form of accountability, and indeed above the law. And that is a very dangerous thing for this country, to have an unethical president who believes they are above the law. The question now is, what does Congress do about this? One of the other very important elements of our report today, which goes beyond the president's misconduct with Ukraine, goes to the president's obstruction of the Congress, of a co-equal branch of government. And I want to underscore also the seriousness of this misconduct, because the president informed every department for which we sought records, the State Department, the Office of Management and Budget, which has the records about the withholding of the aid, the Defense Department, his own White House personnel, to refuse to turn over a single document in answer to congressional subpoenas. The president instructed witnesses not to appear. The president used his office and his bully pulpit to try to intimidate witnesses. If the Congress allows a president to so fully and blanketly obstruct the work of Congress, even involving an impeachment investigation into the president's own misconduct, then we are begging for more of the same. We are signaling to any future president they can engage in whatever corruption, malfeasance, or negligence, and they are beyond accountability. And to my GOP colleagues, they need to consider that when we have a Democratic president, are they willing to say, in answer to their oversight, that a president may simply refuse?
So we all know the answer to that would be no. The Republicans will pretend that they didn't obstruct. They will pretend that they're not rooting for Putin. They will pretend that, the Democratic president is doing something that even Donald Trump did not do. All right, he's not done. There is more. This report is really long. There's about 300 pages of it. Everybody is going through it. I can just tell you that so far it looks like abuse of power and obstruction will be the main focus of the articles of impeachment when they get drafted in the Senate, in the House Judiciary Committee. This is the Intel Committee speaking.
A things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
All right. This is the press conference from the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff on the release of the House Intelligence Committee's report on Ukraine, the president's abuse of power and obstruction of justice.
Because if they are, and if we do, it will mean that the balance of power between our branches of government will be fundamentally altered and altered for the worse. It will mean that future corruption, malfeasance, and incompetence will be far more likely than it is today. The facts here are really not seriously contested. Indeed, the testimony of the witnesses was remarkably consistent. And you might be forgiven, having watched the hearings and watched the reaction of the members of the two parties to the testimony of these witnesses, if you thought that there were two different hearings going on at the same time. This points out another danger that the Founding Fathers were all too aware of, and that is the danger of excessive factionalism. That is, that a political party may become so wedded to a president of their own party that they're unwilling to do their constitutional duty. But I firmly believe that if one party relinquishes its responsibility to the Constitution and to their oath, it does not relieve us of our obligation to the same. And I hope that every member of the House and the Senate, whether these proceedings go forward in the House or they don't, will keep in mind their duty is to the Constitution, not to the person of the president. That ought to be our guiding principle. Finally, I think what's presented to us here is really so aptly summed up in what the president's own chief of staff had to say when he informed the country that, yes, indeed, they had withheld military aid to get this political investigation. He told us to get over it, to get over it. That is what the president does. We should just get over it. This is essentially what he was saying, that we need to just get used to the idea of a corrupt president and get over it.
Wow.
And so we will have to decide, given that the evidence of this misconduct is so clear and uncontested, are we prepared to just get over it? Are we prepared to say that henceforth we must expect from this president and those who follow that there will be a certain amount of corruption in which the national security of the country will be compromised, in which the oath of the office will mean that much less, in which the belief in the rule of law in the United States will be that much less? Is that what we're simply to get over or get used to? Well, I, for one, don't think we should get over this. I don't think we should get used to this. I don't think that's what the founders of this country had in mind. Indeed, I think that when they prescribed a remedy, this kind of conduct by a president of the United States putting his own personal and political interests above the interest of the American people was exactly why they prescribed a remedy as extraordinary as the remedy of impeachment. And so we have a very difficult decision ahead of us to make. And I have every confidence that the Judiciary Committee, in consultation with the entire caucus and our leadership, will not only receive this report, as well as the reports of others, and make a proper determination about whether articles of impeachment are warranted. With that, I'm happy to respond to your questions.
Yes. When did you obtain the cell phone records that are in this report, and what did they tell you that you didn't learn otherwise from the witnesses you interviewed?
Yeah. Well, I can't go into specifics of dates in which we obtained certain evidence, or indeed whether we obtained communications from one or multiple parties. But certainly the phone records show that there was considerable coordination among the parties, including the White House. Coordination in the smear campaign against Ambassador Yovanovitch, which cleared the way for the three amigos to take over a significant part of Ukraine policy. coordination in the execution of that policy, and that this was indeed a continuum that began even prior to the recall of the ambassador. Now, Garrett, your question gets to a very important point, which is there is more investigative work to be done. One of the issues that we are looking into is, did this scheme begin far earlier than we first understood? Was this scheme, in fact, put in place to try to pressure the last president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, and his corrupt prosecutor general, Lutsenko, into conducting these same investigations? And was that plan put into turmoil and chaos when this new reformer, Zelensky, surged in the polling and ultimately won that presidency? That is something we continue to investigate. And that is something that these phone records also shed light on. But even as we believe that we cannot wait because the president's efforts to secure intervention in the next election persist, we continue our investigation, and we will. Yes.
Just to be clear, it sure sounds like you support impeaching the president. Do you support impeaching and then the Senate removing him from office?
I'm going to reserve any kind of a public judgment on that until I have a chance to consult with my colleagues, with our leadership, and I think this really needs to be a decision that we all make as a body. So I'm going to continue to reserve judgment, but as you can tell, I am gravely concerned that if we merely accept this, that we invite not only further corruption of our elections by this president, but we also invite it of the next president. So I am keenly aware of the significance of the precedent we set in whatever direction we move. And I'm also very strongly guided by the fact that one of the seminal moments in this scheme took place the day after Bob Mueller testified, the day after Donald Trump thought that the last investigation was over. He began the next significant step in a new course of misconduct. Yes.
But given that you said there's more investigating to be done, do you feel like presenting the strongest possible case here that you're providing to the Judiciary Committee, or would the case be stronger if you had more time to do this extra investigation?
Yeah. Well, I would say a couple of things. First of all, as I mentioned, we continue to investigate whether this scheme began earlier than expected, whether this scheme also involved the last president of Ukraine. But look, we have provided overwhelming evidence in this report of a scheme to pressure the current president of Ukraine to conduct these political investigations. Will it move others if we're able to show that this was not the first time, this was the second time? I think what we have produced in remarkable short order is so overwhelming that it ought to be presented to the Judiciary Committee now without any further delay.
And that's what will happen. It will be presented to the Judiciary Committee without any further delay. The House will vote on it tonight, and tomorrow it will go to Judiciary, and they will begin to take testimony from legal scholars about what is an impeachable offense and what is not.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Finally, my colleagues asked about, well, doesn't aid get held up for all kinds of reasons? Ambassador Volker, have you ever seen military aid held up because the president wanted his rival investigated?
No, I have not seen that.
Oh.
Have you ever seen that, Mr. Williams? Mr. Morrison, I'm sorry.
No, Chairman.
No, nobody's ever seen anything like it. Nobody. It's just amazing. So today we got the Intelligence Committee's report on these hearings, the evidence that was presented to them, plus other evidence that we haven't seen or known about previously. And one of those things that we did not know about previously is how early this scheme actually began and who was involved in starting it. Now, like I said, journalists across this country and elsewhere are going crazy trying to comb through 300 pages of this report that basically lays out the president's abuse of power by conditioning a White House meeting and military aid to Ukraine in a time of a live war to investigations of American citizens, let alone his political rivals. Now, right at the top, can I just say this to you, please? The president of the United States of America asking any foreign government, I don't care if it was Sweden, to investigate any American citizen is an abuse of power. You don't ask foreign governments to investigate any American citizen. It is why in all of our embassies there are FBI personnel. They are there in case any American citizen under the official cover of the United States as a diplomat or a secretary of this or that, if they do something illegal, they get reported to the legal counsel and to the FBI, who is there for just such occasions. So let's start with that. That is vile. That is gross. That is un-American. That is Politburo, Vladimir Putin, Stasi, brown shirts, black, whatever you want to call them, spying on Americans. It is just bizarre, okay? Now it ratchets up to this. Not only was it an American citizen, but it was somebody that Donald Trump viewed as his likely political rival for the 2020 election. So it was for his personal benefit to ask a foreign government that he says he considered corrupt to investigate his political rival. Now, if Ukraine is corrupt, why is he asking Ukraine to do anything? But it doesn't matter if Ukraine is or isn't corrupt, or if it's met the benchmarks as set forward by DOD and the State Department for anti-corruption measures, which it did back in May. How is the president requesting that a foreign government investigate an American citizen, let alone a political rival, for his own personal benefit? That is just gross. Today we learned that Nunes was involved in this scheme by virtue of telephone records released by AT&T to respond to a congressional subpoena. And this is news in the Intel report. This all started back, according to the phone records anyway, and there could be more in the report that I haven't seen yet. But I can tell you that the phone record portion of this report is stunning. It shows that over the course of the 4 days following April 7th. Now, remember the phone call between Zelensky and Trump, for which we got a memo that summarized what was discussed on that phone call. That phone call was July 25th. Back in April, on April 7th, phone records show that there were contacts between Rudy Giuliani, Parnas, Devin Nunes, and this douche that wrote opinion pieces for The Hill, John Solomon. They were all on the phone together, and specifically Giuliani and Parnas were in contact with one another as well as with John Solomon, who Rudy says should get a Pulitzer Prize for putting garbage out through The Hill. And these were opinion pieces. The phone records also show contacts on April 10th between Rudy Giuliani and Devin Nunes. There were 3 short calls, one after the other, and then there was a text message, and then another 3-minute call on April 10th. And later on April 10th, that same day, Parnas is talking to John Solomon. And remember, Parnas and Igor Fruman are under indictment for lying, for funneling foreign money, Russian money, I suspect, or into the campaign. Did Nunes get money? Who else got money? But later on April 10th, that same day, Parnas and Solomon had a 4-minute, 39-second phone call. So Parnas is talking to this opinion guy at The Hill, who is now, all his work is being reviewed by The Hill. Then on the morning of May 8th, Rudy Giuliani called the White House and connected for 6 minutes and 26 seconds. We don't know who he spoke to at the White House. And then that same day, Rudy Giuliani calls John Solomon at the Hill and talks to him for 6 minutes with Parnas and with Derek Harvey, who is a member of Nunes's staff currently. Derek Harvey is an aide to Devin Nunes, and Devin Nunes, as you know, is the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee. 2 days later, on May 10th, the call records also show that around midday on May 10th, Rudy Giuliani started trading calls with this guy, Kash Patel. Who's Kash? We went over who Kash was. Kash Patel works at the National Security Council, but he previously worked with Devin Nunes as a staffer to Devin Nunes when Devin Nunes was on the Intel Committee. Well, he still is, right? Patel connected with Rudy Giuliani an hour after Giuliani spoke to Ambassador Volker. At 3:23 p.m. Eastern Time, Kash Patel and Giuliani had a 25-minute phone call. 5 minutes after they hung up, Giuliani called an unidentified number and connected with Rudy for 17 minutes. And right after that, Giuliani spoke with Parnas for another 12 minutes. So we think that this scheme, at least to get rid of Maria Jovanovic on behalf of Parnas and Fruman, supported by garbage written by John Solomon in The Hill, started back in April, on April 7th. Now, April, May, June, July, that's 4 months before the phone call. Today, in the Washington Post, there is news that one of the a senior deputy foreign minister was reading diplomatic cables in Ukraine sent from embassies around the world, and that is how she learned that the military aid for Ukraine had been cut off. The military aid in Ukraine was frozen July 3rd.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
All right, everybody, if you're watching us on Free Speech TV, hallelujah, yay, yay. So that would be Dish Channel 9415, DirecTV 348, Sling, Roku, Apple, all of those platforms. And that is because Free Speech TV works to keep us and get us on those platforms. There are 16 people that work over at Free Speech TV out in Denver, and they work really hard. And this is our winter pledge drive match day. This is great for year-end giving because they are not for profit, okay? So if you are interested, today is the most brilliant day for you to make your money go twice as far. We have a guy, his name is Mike, he lives in San Francisco, and he has pledged to match any donation up to $10,000 today. That is awesome. And if you'd like to be part of the match day year-end winter pledge drive, please do dial 877-378-8669. 877-378-8669. That's if you like the phone. If you don't like the phone and you're watching us on your little computer there, all you got to do is navigate over to freespeech.org/donate and put some money in there, pledge something, and it'll be matched up to 10 grand today. That is just awesome. And, they're a not-for-profit, so it's a really good thing to do at the year's end. All right, so that said, let me tell you that the Republicans are so tribal that they are still promoting this Ukraine conspiracy theory that Ukraine meddled in the election. They put out a report last night, 123 pages of drivel. Seriously, dude, this was such garbage. It was so easily debunked. They say that the president was right to ask for these investigations because he was so concerned about corruption in Ukraine, even though his own Department of Defense had certified that Ukraine had met the benchmarks for anti-corruption measures that were set out for Ukraine by us, right? and that the bad news Maria Jovanovic campaign to smear her and defame her. I mean, listen, the president could fire Maria Jovanovic anytime he wanted to. Why did he have to smear her? Why does he have to defame people? Why does he have to go out of his way to ruin their life and their life's work? Why does he have to put them in harm's way like he did with Lisa Page? Lisa Page yesterday said, okay, I'm taking my power back. This is crazy. The IG report is coming out. It's going to clearly show I did not commit an act of treason, nor did I break any law whatsoever, that this was a counterintelligence investigation. And the stuff that we knew, if we really wanted to defeat Trump, why didn't we release it in October and November, right before the election, when we knew what was going on? We didn't. We didn't because we weren't political. We were doing a counterintelligence investigation into Russia's hacking of the DNC. But he had to smear her, and he still continues to smear her. He had to smear Strzok. He had to smear McCabe. Do you know what McCabe's crime was? Does anybody even know what McCabe's crime was? McCabe's crime was that he gave permission, which he's entitled to do, to an FBI staffer to go to the press and announce to the press that he was doing an investigation. And guess what that investigation was regarding? Something Trump did, something Rudy did, something Manafort did, something somebody, with Trump, Carter Page. No, the information that McCabe allowed to be given to the Wall Street Journal was that they were conducting an investigation into the Clinton Foundation. Boy, he's really, he's such a traitor to Donald Trump, isn't he? I mean, this is so sick. Okay, it's so ridiculous. But the Republicans are totally down for this, no matter what the testimony is. They say Donald Trump was obsessed with Ukrainian corruption, even though the testimony from Laura Cooper at DOD and the testimony from others at state and the testimony from others at the National Security Council was all that Donald Trump did not follow the talking points on the Zelensky phone call to bring up corruption, which was laid out for him on a piece of paper. Never brought up corruption then. Didn't bring up corruption prior when he called Zelensky. Never, ever talked about corruption to anybody that worked for him, not to Giuliani, not to Volker, not to Sondland. And that David Holmes, who was sitting in a restaurant in Kiev, could overhear Donald Trump on the phone saying what was important to him were the Biden investigations, and he testified that way. And even though that sworn testimony was consistent from all the different agencies, all the different points of view that we had looking at this situation, from OMB to the State Department to the Department of Defense to the National Security Council, right? We had all these different people from all the different bureaus testify to the same damn thing over and over again. The Republicans are sticking with Ukraine meddled in the elections. It's very sick. It's very twisted. Here's David Holmes testifying about what Donald Trump thought was important with regard to Ukraine and the release of military aid.
Ambassador Sondland agreed that the president did not give an expletive about Ukraine. I asked why not. And Ambassador Sondland stated that the president only cares about big stuff. I noted there was big stuff going on in Ukraine, like a war with Russia. And Ambassador Sondland replied that he meant big stuff that benefits the president, like the Biden investigation that Mr. Giuliani was pushing.
Not concerned with corruption at all. This is such a sham and such a lie. But the Republicans know two things. One, some of them got dirty money, and I'm really sure of that. Two, some of them were in Moscow on the 4th of July celebrating with Vlad. Three, they know that the Republican Party is a dead man walking. It is a dead party. If they remove Donald Trump, they will never have another chairmanship. They will never have another majority in either the House or the Senate, and they will not have the presidency in 2020. And that is why they will stick together and not protect the Constitution or the national security of the United States. And if that happens, if they do this, and Donald Trump gets reelected, it's time to go. I've always said I would tell you when to flee. I would always tell you when it would be time to give up on democracy. if you can't fight. I mean, if you're young and you got some energy left and you're willing to, stand, good, great. But we've put in our 30 years. So I just got to tell you that these Republicans don't give a damn about democracy with a small d. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about abuse of power. They don't care about their own intelligence findings. They don't care that that Vladimir Putin hacked into the United States, committed a cyber warfare, repeated cyber warfare incidences, that they waged cyber war on the United States, that they funneled all of this material to WikiLeaks, and that the White House was coordinating the release, and that's why Roger Stone is going to jail, okay? They don't care about the obstruction of justice. They don't care that Rudy Giuliani was enriching himself and working with guys who are indicted. They don't care that Flynn was indicted. They don't care that Manafort is sitting in jail for 7.5 years. They don't care that everybody around the president who was at least worthy of some respect of the American people have all fled because they understood that they were going to have to sell their soul to the devil, and he wasn't worth it. Russia committed acts of war against us, and Russia downed two airliners, okay? Russia literally took down a Russian Aeroflot flight, it's hard to say, that was leaving from Turkey because they said there was a guy on board who was threatening to do terrorism. The guy was drunk, okay? And they admitted that the guy was drunk. They took down a Malaysian airliner. They had a Russian pro-democracy activist who was poisoned twice in 2 years. Vladimir Karamurza, Alexander Litvinenko, he died in London after being fed polonium during a meeting at a restaurant with ex-KGB contacts. He was working for the British Secret Service at the time. Viktor Yushchenko, Ukraine's former president, he got ill in 2004. He was an opposition candidate. I don't know if you remember him. His blood samples show abnormally high levels of a dioxin called TCDD, a chemical compound that causes cancer and organ disease. They believe it was put in his food. Yushchenko developed lesions that disfigured his face and led to severe abdominal and back pain. He survived. He later became president. He accused Russia of being behind the plot to kill him. Nikolai Golshov was found strangled in his home near London in March. Boris Nemtsov, a Russian opposition leader, was shot to death in 2015 walking after dinner with his girlfriend. Boris Berezovsky, an oligarch who was Putin's right-hand man, was found hanged in his mansion outside London in 2013. We all know about Sergei Magnitsky, who died in prison.
Clear for
Mary had a little lamb.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
If you excluded debunked conspiracy theories, could any of these people actually tell you why Vladimir Putin is so bad? Why is he so bad? He's bad, Chuck Todd says. Okay. Speak slowly so I can understand. What makes Vladimir Putin worse than, I don't know, a whole long list of American allies? Let's try the King of Saudi Arabia, for example, or the people who run the Emirates, the people on whose payroll so many in Washington are right now. Why is he worse than them? They couldn't answer that. For Chuck Todd and the rest of the dummies, Vladimir Putin isn't a real person with actual ideas and priorities and a country and beliefs. No, he stopped being that long ago. He's a metaphor, a living metaphor. He's the boogeyman. Step out of line and you're a traitor in league with Vladimir Putin. Let's put his picture on the screen. Can we get his picture on the screen?
His picture's on the screen.
Please. The irony, of course, is that Putin, for all his faults, does not hate America as much as many of these people do. They really dislike our country. And they call other people traitors because they're mouthing the talking points of Putin. These are people who don't know anything about Russia, who don't speak Russian. who couldn't identify 3 cities in Russia.
That is the alternative universe. I cannot believe that the conservative media is actually promoting the goodness of the killer criminal oligarch, of the thievery, of the oppressive invade your neighbors, Vladimir Putin, of the guy who shoots down passenger planes twice, the guy who poisons people, the guy who tortures people, the guy who kills any opponent that runs against him or dares to run against him. Investigative journalists. I don't know. You remember Anna Politkovskaya? It's a hard name to say. Politkovskaya. She was an investigative journalist. She exposed Russian atrocities in Chechnya. They gunned her down in the stairwell of her apartment building in 2006. This is just crazy. A member of the Russian parliament was gunned down in broad daylight in Kiev, in Ukraine. A Russian ambassador to the United Nations, suddenly drops dead at work. A Russian-backed commander in the Ukrainian breakaway province of Donetsk was blown up in an elevator. A Russian media executive was found dead in a D.C. hotel room. Sergei Magnitsky was beaten with a rubber hose, literally, to death in prison and denied medical care. I mean, polonium and Skripal and his daughter Julia, everything. I mean, this is crazy. And they're defending this man. They're defending him. What's so bad about Putin? What's so bad about him? He belongs with the Kim Jong-uns of the world. He belongs with the, Saudi kings of the world who also torture their relatives and dismember people in Turkish embassies. Erdogan, another autocrat. Viktor Orban, Poland, another autocrat. I mean, these are people that will murder their own people to enrich themselves, and Donald Trump wants to be like them. And Fox News is giving him a green light. We got the base. You go take whatever you want. Just make sure you give us some vig. Make sure that we get paid. Devin Nunes, how much money did he get? Lindsey Graham, how much money did he get? All these crazy freaking people, how much money did they get? Did the NRA launder $30 million or not? And if they did, where did it go? Where did it go? This is unbelievable, and he won't stop. I mean, Tucker Carlson last week, he said he was rooting for Russia. He said it again last night, and Jim Jordan is sitting there on the TV with him, and he tells Jim Jordan, I'm rooting for Russia.
I should say, for the record, I'm totally opposed to these sanctions, and I don't think that we should be at war with Russia. And I think we should probably take the side of Russia if we have to choose between Russia and Ukraine. That is my view.
That is my view. I think we should take the side of Russia over Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine. Here's the thing that you need to know. Ukraine, as I've told you a million times, is the largest country in Europe. It's huge. So Russia is some third-rate country without Ukraine. With Ukraine, it's an empire. Ukraine wants to be a democratic, Western allied, European allied nation. They want to be a democracy. They want free and fair elections. They want free speech. They want freedom of assembly. They want all the things that we would want for any country. And Russia wants to kill, maim, mangle, and mutilate people and cover it up. They want to poison people. They want to down airliners. They want to steal from their own people. They want a mafioso kind of a government where all the money has to be paid to the capo, and the capo is Putin. And he wants to put back together the old Soviet Union, which we spent a fortune dismantling since World War II. Stalin killed 22 million of his own people, of Russians. He killed 22 million Russians. Does everybody remember who Russia is, what the old Soviet Union is, that Vladimir Putin is a KGB agent, that they hacked America, they conducted cyber warfare on America? Never mind the planes and the poison and the people falling off balconies and people drowning in their bathtubs. Yeah, that happens in Russia. Never mind that people in Russia get $450 a month to live on, and Vladimir Putin's one of the richest men in the world. Never mind that. Donald Trump wants what Vladimir Putin has. He wants 98% of the vote. That's what he wants. He wants to be a unitary executive. Screw the Constitution. And they're defending him on Fox News, and the Republicans are defending him. I mean, this is the sickest thing in the world. I want to show you a little exchange last night. This was amazing on CNN. It was amazing for many, many reasons. But this is the guy who took Ron Paul's seat, not Rand Paul, but Ron, the father. Remember, the father was only a congressman from Texas's 14th district. So now this guy, Randy Weber, is now occupying that particular seat in Texas, okay? He goes on Chris Cuomo last night. Check this out.
Chris, was CrowdStrike involved in the DCCC hacking?
Yes.
Or is CrowdStrike in part owned by a Ukrainian?
No.
Really?
Yes.
That's not the information. Yes, really, or yeah? That's not the information that we have. And
you have bad information. The man is American born of Russian descent. He's not Ukrainian. And even if he were, that's what you're going to hang it on? Your head of national security, Tom Bossert, said that that was a joke. You heard testimony from experts saying it's a joke. The intel community says it's not true. Mueller said it's not true. Burr said it's not true.
What Trump is saying is go back and let's look at all of the information on the DCCC server that helped fight against his campaign.
They operated in a cloud system. There is no server to steal.
No server, but they were hacked into, and the president wanted that investigated. It's one of the things that he gave to President Zelensky as an example of corruption.
It was investigated. What he went to Zelensky with was a conspiracy theory that there's some missing server when there is no physical server. CrowdStrike and the FBI both said it.
This is really twisted. This is really weird. Now, I have to say Chris Cuomo was incorrect. Let's just correct, because, you know, it's not that big of a deal, but still, you want to get the facts right? So I hope maybe he'll fix it tonight. But the man who co-founded CrowdStrike, his name is Dmitry Alperowitz. And Dmitry was born in Moscow, not Ukraine. So that's true enough. He's not Ukrainian. But he was born in Moscow, and he emigrated to the United States as a young teenage boy. Young, very young, like 13. So the co-founder of CrowdStrike is not Ukrainian, as Donald Trump keeps telling the crazy people out there, the Cult 45 members. He is from Moscow. He came here at 13 years old. There is a server. It's in the DNC headquarters basement, but the email server was cloud-based.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Let's walk through some of what's in the whistleblower's complaint, and I want to show it up on the screen. It starts with President Zelensky saying, "I'd like to thank the president for your great support in the area of defense. We are ready to continue to cooperate for the next step. Specifically, we are almost ready to buy more javelins from the United States for defense purposes." And then the president says, "I would like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people, the server, they say Ukraine has it. There are a lot of things that went on, the whole situation." Now, what the president is referring to there is a debunked conspiracy theory that somehow Ukraine, not Russia, hacked the Democratic emails in 2016, and that Ukraine might have the DNC server or Hillary's emails. The details are both convoluted and false, and during your time in the White House, you explained that to the president, right?
I did. It's not only a conspiracy theory, it is completely debunked. You know, I don't want to be glib about this matter, but last year, retired former Senator Judd Gregg wrote a piece in the Hill magazine saying the 3 ways or the 5 ways to impeach oneself. And the 3rd way was to hire Rudy Giuliani. And at this point, I am deeply frustrated with what he and the legal team is doing and repeating that debunked theory to the president. It sticks in his mind when he hears it over and over again. And for clarity here, George, let me just again repeat that it has no validity. The United States government reached its conclusion on attributing to Russia the DNC hack in 2016 before it even communicated it to the FBI and long before the FBI ever knocked on the door at the DNC.
So everybody, that he was a former National Security Council member. That's Tom Bossert, obviously, back in September, or saying that this was a completely debunked conspiracy theory about Ukraine having something to do with interfering in the American election. And what is this based on? Okay, this is based on Donald Trump going on the television and saying, right as he was becoming the Republican nominee, advocating for Vladimir Putin's position that invading and annexing Crimea was good. It was good because in Trump's guesstimation, or what Trump was told by Vladimir Putin to say, is that Ukrainians want to be part of Russia again. Meanwhile, 10,000 Ukrainians had already been killed at this point, beating back Russia. Beating them back. And Russia was pushing military equipment into the eastern portion of Ukraine at that time. And Donald Trump gets on American television and says, you know, I think Ukraine wants to be part of Russia.
He's not going into Ukraine, okay? Just so you understand. He's not going to go into Ukraine.
He's in Ukraine.
All right, you can mark it down, you can put it down, you can take it anywhere you want.
Well, he's already there, isn't he?
Okay, well, he's there in a certain way, but I'm not there. You have Obama there. And frankly, that whole part of the world is a mess under Obama, with all the strength that you're talking about and all of the power of NATO and all of this. In the meantime, he's going away. He takes Crimea. He's sort of, I mean...
But you said you might recognize that.
I'm going to take a look at it. But, you know, the people of Crimea, from what I've heard, would rather be with Russia than where they were. And you have to look at that also.
This was completely outrageous to the Ukrainian people. And there was actually testimony during the last 2 weeks of hearings from Fiona Hill, from many people who served over there, that the Ukrainians were literally beside themselves to hear Donald Trump say that. To hear Donald Trump say that after 10,000, now 13,000 are dead, but back then 10,000 Ukrainians had died. And so a op-ed, this is what Senator Kennedy's entire, rant about how he believes Ukraine interfered because a former Ukrainian ambassador wrote an op-ed in The Hill, believe it or not, and said that it was kind of outrageous to hear Donald Trump insult the Ukrainian people that way. But that's what Senator Kennedy is saying this op-ed constituted meddling in our election.
I was asked if Russia or Ukraine had tried to influence our 2016 election, and I said both, and I believe both. I based that on 8 long opinion pieces, op-ed pieces in the Politico, Financial Times, The Hill, Washington Examiner, CBS News, Economist, Bloomberg News, and the New York Times. All reputable periodicals and newspapers. And the Politico headline, for example, was Ukraine efforts to sabotage Trump backfire. The Financial Times, this is August of 2016, it's a really good piece. Headline is Ukraine's leaders campaign against Trump. Bloomberg News headline is, quote, Ukrainian officials meddled in 2016 election by leaking secret Manafort ledger. Court says. They're referring to a court in Ukraine that found that their public officials had meddled in our election.
All right, let me stop him there. He's going to go on and on. I just want you to know the Politico article from January 2017. It was a story about a woman who was a Ukrainian woman who was not ever in Ukraine, but she was looking for helpful information to raise the alarm about Paul Manafort in 2016. Because when she saw Paul Manafort join the campaign and the Republican National Committee platform change from supporting Ukraine in its efforts to beat back Russia with lethal weaponry, should they meet anti-corruption benchmarks, she was alarmed. Her name is Chalupa. Everybody heard. Devin Nunes mentioned her a billion times. Every witness was asked, did you have any interaction with Miss Chalupa? No one knew her. No one knew her. She never got involved politically because she understood that Ukraine enjoyed bipartisan support from both sides of the aisle, from U.S. lawmakers, from the Republican side and the Democratic side. That was in the political article as well. And also in that same political article, it said there was little evidence of a top-down effort by the Ukrainian government to sabotage Trump's campaign. It never alleged that any government official worked for Hillary Clinton, as John Kennedy alleges here. Ms. Chalupa did testify to the Senate Intelligence Committee. Oh, yes, she did. And she said that she had been targeted by a Russian active measures campaign because Russia was trying to pin the blame on Ukraine for the hacking they did as part of a large disinformation operation. She confirmed to Politico in that article that she was sworn and questioned by the Senate Intelligence Committee. And there was a conclusion reached by the Senate Intelligence Committee that Ukraine did not interfere in the election at all. And yet he keeps pointing to these articles. By the way, that court decision that he points to, you know, Mr. Lutz and Mr. Less, yeah, that's where this comes out.
Fatality. Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
All right, let me finish playing the traitor to the Constitution, a traitor to national security, Senator Kennedy, quoting articles.
Bloomberg News headline is, quote, Ukrainian officials meddled in 2016 election by leaking secret Manafort ledger.
Okay, let's take this up here because these are two people that you know. You know, the names start to get very familiar, like Viktor Yanukovych and Maria Yovanovitch, right? And then we had these difficult names to discern, right? The difference between the two men. But the difference between the two men is day and night, right? So you had Mr. Lutz. He is the driver of the former Ukrainian President Poroshenko, who Poroshenko made sort of his attorney general, okay? His, and then you had Mr. Lesenko, and he's a good guy. So let's look at what happened here with this article about the courts ruled that the Ukrainian government officials were leaking the Black Ledger documents to damage the Trump campaign. Here are the facts. The ledger, the Black Ledger. What is the Black Ledger? Viktor Yanukovych, a Russia-connected Putin puppet who was president of Ukraine, was paying under-the-table payments to one Mr. Paul Manafort and stealing from the Ukrainian treasury to pay himself and live a lavish lifestyle. So they had protests in Ukraine. They were called the Protests of Dignity. Some people know them as the Maidan protests, right? Okay, the Orange Revolution. And those protests were successful, but people did die. And those protests were to get Yanukovych out of Ukraine, to depose him, to make him run, flee. And he did. And he went right back to Putin's loving arms in Russia, where I guess he still is. The ledger that was found in his mansion was found by the protesters and released by the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. I told you, NABU. the Ukrainians had set up an anti-corruption bureau, kind of like we set up the Consumer Protection Agency with Elizabeth Warren, who, now, Mick Mulvaney took it over and gutted it, right? Because they love corruption. Donald Trump,
I do want always corruption.
I do want always corruption. So they did it too in Ukraine to try and get rid of all this stealing and oligarchy and paying yourself and depriving the Ukrainian people of the money that was in their own treasury, right? Okay. So the Black Ledger was found by protesters after Viktor Yanukovych fled back to the loving arms of his puppet master, Vladimir Putin, and the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, NABU, actually made public the ledgers. Sergei Lysenko, he was a Ukrainian member of parliament. He was also a journalist and opposed to Poroshenko. That is who Kennedy is accusing of breaking the law. They accused him of launching a politically motivated investigation into the Ledger's release to curry favor with Trump. Now, who did this? Who launched this investigation? Mr. Lutz. Rudy Giuliani's buddy, who he tried to get a visa for to come here to testify against Hillary Clinton, believe it or not. Okay, so Lysenko, Mr. Les, described his motivations in publishing the Black Ledger in an article in the Kiev Post. It's an English language newspaper in Ukraine. And he said, quote, on May 31st, 2016, I gave a press conference and I released 22 pages of the ledger that I had. Manafort was not mentioned in those 22 pages. His role only became known 3 months later, in August 16, when the New York Times reported on it. American reporters at the New York Times took a look at the ledger that the Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, NABU, had. They asked to see it. And the American journalists, of course, were digging for Manafort's name because everybody knew that he was a lobbyist for Viktor Yanukovych, and this was Yanukovych's Black Ledger. So it was American journalists who actually drew the connection between the Black Ledger, Yovanovitch, oh God, here we go. You know what I'm talking about. The Black Ledger and the payments. But Mr. Lutz decided the dirty prosecutor who was a driver to Viktor Yanukovych, he was a driver. He had no legal experience at all. Okay, so Mr. Lutz decided to finger Les and point at Les and say, Les did this to embarrass Trump because Russia preferred Trump, remember? So the 6th Administrative Court of Appeals in Ukraine was forced to look at this case that Mr. Lutz brought against Les. And the appeals court vacated the ruling that idiot boy Senator John Kennedy keeps bringing up. And a court in Ukraine found that a member of the government, the member of the government is this journalist / member of parliament who was pro-democracy, anti-Yanukovych. And the court afterward, after they convicted him, he appealed it. And the appeals court vacated the ruling. It said Lyshenko and the head of the National Ukrainian Anti-Corruption Bureau, NABU, did not interfere. But there once was a finding by the court that said that they did interfere by publicizing this. That is what Kennedy keeps referring to. And the other thing they keep referring to in all these other articles is an opinion piece that was written by Ukraine's ambassador to the United States. His name is Verle Chalet. And he wrote this opinion piece for The Hill after Donald Trump said, well, it's good for the Ukrainians because they want to be part of Russia anyway. So, I might recognize the annexation of Crimea, a part of Ukraine, by Russia. I might actually say that invading your neighbors, if Putin does it, is a great thing for the neighbor he invaded because they want to be with him anyway. And so Ambassador Chalet wrote an op-ed piece talking about the recent comments by Republican nominee Donald Trump about the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea, occupied by Russia since March 2014, have raised serious concerns in Kiev and beyond.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
All right, this is the Winter Pledge Drive Match Day, and it's a very, very awesome thing, okay, because Free Speech TV that distributes our show for us is a not-for-profit company that has the ability to disseminate our show, to distribute our show to Dish Network, to DirecTV, to Sling, Roku, and Apple. And that takes a lot of work, believe it or not, to maintain the feeds and to do everything that it takes to distribute a show. Okay, it's not easy. And there are 16 people that work there, and they are wholly dependent upon your generosity and your giving. And so we have a fabulous person in San Francisco. His name is Mike, and Mike has pledged to match your pledge today up to $10,000. So if you gave 100, it'd be 200. If you gave 200, it'd be 400. On and on it goes, right? So all you need to do is take advantage of this, and of course they are not for profit. So it's a great year-end thing to do, for your taxes and stuff. But it's a great year-end give. To just do something great at the end of the year is a beautiful thing. So dial 877-378-8669. 877-378-8669. And whatever you pledge, it could be $5. It'll be 10, right? If you gave 10, it'd be 20. 25 is 50. So it's just a beautiful thing. And if you are more of an internet person, if you're more of an emailer or more of a click and go, then just go to freespeech.org. It's an org, because it's a not-for-profit, freespeech.org/donate. And whatever you give, it'll be matched by Mike in San Francisco up to 10 grand. So thank you, Mike in San Francisco, and thank everybody for supporting this awesome, awesome platform. It may be the only thing left. It may be the only thing left. I mean, this is just crazy. This is just, we're through the looking glass. I think everybody gets it. The Putin talking points have become the American president's talking points. The Putin talking points have become the American Senate's talking points. The Putin talking points have become the talking points of the grand old perverts. I mean, it is just, I never thought that I would hear Republicans defending Vladimir Putin. I never thought that I would live to see the day where Ronald Reagan is literally chafing from rolling in the grave. He's probably got like rug rash from rolling over in that coffin of his. I mean, this is just, it takes your breath away to listen to them make excuses for Donald Trump parroting Putin's talking point that it was Ukraine that interfered because an op-ed was written in The Hill magazine and a dirty prosecutor prosecuted an innocent man in Ukraine for releasing a black ledger that put Paul Manafort in jail for 7.5 years. What kind of alternate universe do they want us to live in, where slavery is freedom, where war is peace? What the hell? Have they decided that the American people are so dumb at this point, or dead inside at this point, that they can do and say anything and just go ahead and steal it all? Now, we know these tax cuts, you know, the tax code has always been their preferred vehicle for transferring wealth in this country. Republicans never raised a tax, ever, carried interest, meaning you're a rich guy and you don't feel like paying interest this year on your capital gains because, you know, you make money off of your money and your money paid you this year, let's say $1 million, and you don't feel like paying, 32% or 25% or 15% or any percent. So what you do is you check the carried interest. I'm going to carry this payment over to next year. I'll deal with it next year. And then next year you do it again. I don't want to pay for it. I'll do it next year. Carried it. This is one of the biggest frauds against American, hardworking, tax-paying people. And so they always lobbied on the tax code and used it as the vehicle to transfer. I guess they're tired of it. I guess they think, having to fight for a tax cut every 2 years is too much to ask from them because they don't move any legislation, the Republicans. They don't raise the minimum wage, and they're not interested in fixing health care for us, and they're not interested in prescription drug prices being negotiated by the awesome Medicare program with Big Pharma, because they get paid by these guys. So maybe they've decided, after all, it's much easier to just go ahead and steal from the Treasury and go ahead and funnel foreign money into the campaigns and take that money and just, screw the American people. I mean, they can't understand it anyway. They never understood, how we transfer wealth in this country. So now we're just going to, not even bother. We're just going to take. We're just going to take and take and take. And we're never going to give. We're never going to give anything. And if anybody comes near us, if anybody tries to lay a glove on us for stealing from the American Treasury or stealing from the American people or taking foreign money or doing anything that is violative of the Constitution and creating a king up in the White House who will let us, get away with murder, literally, on Fifth Avenue, we'll just blame somebody else. Well, I mean, they would go as far as to tell you you're doing it to yourself. This op-ed was so innocent, I have to tell you, and it was written by the Ukrainian ambassador just to say that the comments that Donald Trump made right here...
He's not going into Ukraine, okay? Just so you understand. He's not going to go into Ukraine. All right, you can mark it down, you can put it down, you can take it in. He's
already there, isn't he?
Okay,
For 2 years
he's there in a certain way, but I'm not there. You have Obama there. And frankly, that whole part of the world is a mess under Obama, with all the strength that you're talking about and all of the power of NATO and all of this. In the meantime, he's going away. He takes Crimea. He's sort of, But
you said you might recognize that.
I'm going to take a look at it. But, the people of Crimea, from what I've heard, would rather be with Russia than where they were. And you have to look at that also.
That is the comment that blew people's minds in Ukraine. And so the ambassador wrote, recent comments by Republican nominee Donald Trump about the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea, occupied by Russia since March 2014, have raised serious concerns in Kiev and beyond Ukraine. Many in Ukraine are unsure what to think, since Trump's comments stand in sharp contrast to the Republican Party platform. Since the Russian aggression, there has been bipartisan support for U.S. sanctions against Russia, and for such sanctions to remain in place until the territorial integrity of Ukraine is restored. He goes on and he says, even if Trump's comments are only speculative and do not really reflect a future foreign policy, they call for appeasement of an aggressor and support the violation of a sovereign country's territorial integrity and another's breach of international law. In the eyes of the world, such comments seem alien to a country seen by partners as a strong defender of democracy and international order. The United States was among the 100 nations which supported the UN resolution, Territorial Integrity of Ukraine, which refused to recognize Russia's attempt to annex Crimea. A candidate for the presidency in any country ought to realize the challenges he or she will face to ensure consistency in foreign policy and uphold his or her country's international commitments. And then he lays it out for whoever wants to know how, in 1994, Ukraine entered into something called the Budapest Multilateral Commitment. What was that? Ukraine had to give away the world's third largest nuclear arsenal. And in return, it would get security assurances that it would remain intact it could keep its integrity territorially, and it could protect itself from Russian aggression and incursion. And the people that signed that agreement were the United States, the UK, and freaking Russia. Because they were willing to give up all their nukes. And they had the third largest nuclear arsenal, and they did it. And so this Ukrainian ambassador is saying that that commitment was broken by Russia. He says this commitment has been broken by one signatory country which attempted to annex Crimea and invaded Ukraine's Donbass region. Ukraine was just recovering from the bloodshed in the Maidan, orchestrated by Viktor Yanukovych. Russia seized control over Crimea's Supreme Council and its security infrastructure. A sham referendum carried out at gunpoint. Gunpoint. And he goes on to talk about, how Russia is bringing in weapons and military equipment to the eastern part of Ukraine. He says 6,000 tons of fuel, 80 tons of ammunition, 120 tons of military cargo, parts for military vehicles, all were delivered through an uncontrolled part of the Russian border with Ukraine. Russian-backed militias have used a wide variety of heavy weapons, mortars, high-caliber artillery, and tanks. 10,000 Ukrainians have died, 2 million displaced internally. And Donald Trump says they want to be with Russia. Ukraine wants to be. And this was so insulting.
Mary had a little man. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
This week, we will begin the very critical process of hearing from constitutional experts to really lay out the ground for impeachment of the president. So as we, from the intelligence community, turned over that report to judiciary, we still have a lot of work to do.
And we know the witnesses for Wednesday's hearing will be legal experts on impeachment. Any sense of how many future hearings your committee will hold? And do you expect any fact witnesses to be called or recalled from the Intelligence Committee's proceedings?
Well, we have not really made the decision on future hearings or future witnesses yet. I think our main focus right now is to have the president and his counsel, who you know are given the same privileges as President Nixon and President Clinton had, to participate and engage in this impeachment process, even to the point of if we have any executive sessions on the Judiciary Committee, they're invited to participate. So we are certainly hoping that the president, his counsel, will take advantage of that opportunity. If he has not done anything wrong, we're certainly anxious to hear his explanation of that.
Have you gotten any indication the White House will be involved or the counsel?
We have not. As you may know, Chairman Nadler sent a letter. I know they've been in conversations with the White House and counsel, but they sent a letter just again inviting the president, making sure that he and his counsel are aware of the opportunities to fully engage and participate in this process. We are certainly hoping that he will, as I said.
This is amazing. I'm still full. I'm not agile yet. I'm still full. I'm still eating. And it's December. Everybody, stop eating. Stop it now. Because here come the diet commercials, right? Because of what we just did. Because of what we just did. Well, I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I hope you fought about normal things. I hope you fought about the money. I hope you fought about football. I hope you fought about fantasy football. I hope you fought about whether or not red zone is for people with ADD. I mean, I hope you had normal fights, because this country is so split down the butt crack that 53% of Republicans believe that Donald Trump is a better president than Abraham Lincoln. Honest Abe. Honest Abe, they believe Abraham Lincoln, 53% of Republicans, is a better president than Honest Abe. They also believe that that Trump is a better president than Dwight Eisenhower. 65% say Trump is a better president than Dwight Eisenhower. Do you really want to be fighting with those people with knives on the table? I say no. I say no, especially if you saw my table, there was wine on it. Not that I imbibed. I did not imbibe because I was the designated driver for Loretta. Yeah. But, you know, I mean, you don't want to have knives on the table. You don't want to have alcohol on the table when this is the situation. How are you going to argue with somebody who thinks that 71% of America thinks that Donald Trump is a better president than Dwight Eisenhower, or 65% think he's better than Eisenhower, 53% think he's better than freaking Lincoln? I mean, this is crazy. You know, here's what this survey said. 71% claimed Trump was a better president than H.W. Bush and George W. Bush. All right, I'm part of that. Not really. I mean, I just think they all sucked. I mean, where was the option to check off they all sucked? Where was the option to check off why did they go into Iraq in the first place? And what is Trump doing guarding oil in Syria? Do you know what I'm saying? Okay, 8 in 10 Republicans, 80% think Trump was a better president than Gerald Ford, who was president for like 5 seconds and pardoned Richard Nixon. 86% say he's better than Richard Nixon. The only exception with Republicans, Ronald Reagan. He's their, he's the Jesus. Donald Trump is the prodigal son. No, the prodigal son is Jesus. I'm a Jew. Leave me out of that. Moses? I don't know. But 6 in 10, 60% say Reagan was better than Donald Trump. I mean, you cannot argue with people like this. You just can't. And they are unified in their stubbornness. And I'm not just talking about the people on the ground. I'm talking about the people who should know better. This is a sick propaganda situation. America has never seen this before in my lifetime, okay? And it's not a short lifetime, so that's saying a lot, right? But tonight at 6 o'clock, here's what's going to happen. Tonight at 6 o'clock, it's Monday, everybody. It's the Monday after the gorge. It's the Monday after the feast. It's the Monday after you stuffed yourself silly, laid on a couch, fell asleep with Red Zone on, and your relatives just said, I'm out, right? And just somehow moseyed on off. It was very peaceful at my house, I must say. But tonight at 6 o'clock, the Intelligence Committee is going to release the Ukraine report. They're going to release their findings after they had spoken to 17 witnesses. Now, they called a whole bunch, we saw a whole bunch, but they spoke to 17 witnesses. So tomorrow, I believe there will be a vote on whether or not to endorse Adam Schiff's Intelligence Committee's findings on the Ukraine probe, findings on bribery, findings. These are not the articles of impeachment. This is just to accept the report, to say that the report is something that the House accepts as being true. Now, that's going to be a party line vote because, like I said, half of this government, the people who know better, are so stubborn because they understand two things. One, some of them are implicated, like Devin Nunes. Some of them have very dirty hands, like Jim Jordan, who, if you wanted to, I don't know, be a wrestling doctor and abuse 215 and 14-year-old boys by drugging them and raping them, or, you know, doing untoward things to yourself in a shower in front of them, and there was a coach that could vouch for it or could deny, then you would want that person to be Jim Jordan. And so you got people that are so completely corrupt and so completely, I don't know. I mean, if we're going to have propaganda, I might as well have compromat too, right? We have members of the House that are so compromised that it's sick. It's sad. So this is probably going to be a party line vote over what we heard under oath by guys like Volker and Sondland and Fiona Hill and what's her name? The one that DOD who said that Wallace, who said that the DOD certified that Ukraine had met all the benchmarks for anti-corruption efforts. I mean, you know, this is unbelievable. So a party line vote on what the facts actually show. And then that'll be Tuesday, the vote. Then on Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning, we're going to have hearings by constitutional scholars on what constitutes an impeachable offense, okay? What constitutes an impeachable offense. Now, I'm predicting that the articles of impeachment, which have not been drafted yet, which will be drafted in the Judiciary Committee, not the Intelligence Committee, I am predicting that those articles, and there will be more than one according to me, okay, just according to me. So for those of you who keep track of how often I'm right and wrong, this would be a good day to earmark, okay? I'm saying that there will be a bribery, abuse of power article. I'm saying there will be an obstruction article on this Ukraine investigation and an obstruction article with regard to the Mueller report. There may also be, and this is up for grabs, I don't know how deep they want to get, an article about perjury and witness tampering with regard to the written answers in the Mueller report. Because the testimony from Mueller to that same congresswoman we just played, Val Demings of Florida, was that generally Trump was dishonest in his written answers to Mueller. So I think that there will be multiple articles of impeachment, but I just want you to know that the Intelligence Committee worked all throughout the Thanksgiving holiday to complete this report. So I'll send them my leftovers.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Will Republicans on the committee call for subpoena witnesses to testify? And if so, who are you going to ask to testify?
Oh, of course. We're going to testify. First and foremost, the first person who needs to testify is Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff is the author of this report. Adam Schiff has been the author of many things, a lot of them found to be false over the past couple of years, but he's going to be the author of this report. He's compared himself in the past to a special counsel. This is what he said he was doing. Well, if we go back to Clinton and even back to Nixon, but in Clinton, Ken Starr was a special counsel. He presented a report that we're going to get as judiciary. He actually came and sat and testified under oath and took questions from all sides, including the White House. My first and foremost witness is Adam Schiff.
So you want to bring him in before the committee, not just to present a report, but to take questions from Democrats and to be cross-examined, if you will, by the Republicans?
He needs to be. He's put himself into that position. If he chooses not to, then I really question his veracity and what he's putting in his report. I question his, the motives of why he's doing it. It's easy to hide behind a report. It's easy to hide behind a gavel in intelligence committees, behind closed-door hearings. But it's going to be another thing to actually get up and have to answer questions about what his staff knew, how he knew, what he did about the whistleblower report, his interactions that he's had with the Ukraine, the other things that he's had over time in this process, and also why he has still not released documents to our committee and reports to our committee that we need to actually proceed in our committee, of Judiciary Committee, which is the Committee of Impeachment. I have a question. Why are they hiding this stuff from us? If they think they have such a case, give us all the materials and don't let Jerry Nadler write a crazy letter that says on the 6th, let us know who your witnesses are. We don't even have the information from the Intel Committee yet. This is why this is a problematic exercise and simply a made-for-TV event coming on Wednesday.
Okay, that was Doug Collins, a Republican from Georgia, okay? And he is alleging that Adam Schiff needs to be called as a witness because Ken Starr, the special prosecutor in Clinton, in the matter of the impeachment of Bill Clinton, was called as the only witness, okay? That's because Ken Starr had a secret grand jury proceeding, and he was the only lawyer allowed in the secret grand jury proceedings, right? Ken Starr was alone in a room with no defense attorney, no Clinton attorney, no Clinton witnesses, no exculpatory evidence, nothing. Okay, Ken Starr controlled a secret grand jury proceeding that indicted Bill Clinton. And so at the impeachment of Bill Clinton, the indictment of Bill Clinton, Ken Starr played the prosecutor again. Now, in this particular instance, Adam Schiff had questioning of 17 witnesses, in which you were included. And we know that because when we saw the transcripts, there were questions that were asked by Republican members who were included in the questioning of all those 17 witnesses. That's number one. So Adam Schiff did not control anything. Adam Schiff did not do secret, dungeon, basement, backdoor, backroom hearings. You were invited to all of them, where Ken Starr invited no one from the Clinton camp or from the Democrats or any other person at all into the grand jury. So that's just ridiculous. Now, as for, the deadline to announce witnesses, their deadline to announce witnesses is December 6th. After the release of the report tomorrow. So now, if he's lost as to which witnesses he should be calling because he doesn't know what's in the report, he will know tonight at 6 o'clock. That's number one. Number two, then he was sleeping through those hearings, which you and me were not. Number three, call Mick Mulvaney. Call Mike Pompeo. Call John Bolton. All the people that the president will not let testify. If there's any confusion about which party they belong to, I suggest you Google them. I mean, this is such theater. This is such propaganda. They never attack the facts. They just keep going after Adam Schiff or the whistleblower. The whistleblower has been totally validated by every one of the witnesses who testified because they were either on the phone call or on the ground in Ukraine, meeting with Zelensky or meeting with Yermak, who was the primary contact for Zelensky, and they had firsthand knowledge of what was going on. They had firsthand knowledge of a deal. They had firsthand knowledge of the withholding of aid. So did Ukraine. They had firsthand knowledge of what was being done to Marie Yovanovitch by Rudy Giuliani. They testified that they were directed by Donald Trump to have Rudy Giuliani take the lead in this swampy, disgusting shakedown of Ukraine at a time of war. What is their confusion? Why are they so confused? Maybe the mushrooms that they had were not the same ones we served. This is so bizarre and so disingenuous and such a freaking cover-up of a cover-up of a cover-up. Okay? And you got crazy, crazy Republicans. Steve Bannon was on the TV just, said how happy he is that all the Republicans are completely they're in the mud. They're down in the dirt, and they're going to stay there with Trump.
Let's go back to unity and substance. You've got the Republican Party, and I've been one of the rebels in the Republican Party. You've got the Republican Party more united than it's ever been, even in the run-up to the 2016 election. You have them saying this is unacceptable, it's unfair, this man was elected. We're not going to let this, we're not going to let the nullification project on overturning the 2016 election happen. Everybody's pulling together. So you have unity. You look at Hurd, who is probably the outlier on the committee. He's basically said, hey, I am not voting for impeachment. So you have the Republicans totally united. On the Democrat side, you've already had a member of leadership, and you had Van Drew. You've already had 2 vote no, and now you've got the 31. A lot of them saying, hey, I'm neutral right now. So I think you could have a carve-off of up to a half a dozen Democrats that don't vote for this, which then turns it into not just a partisan vote, but a highly partisan vote. And we've never had that on any impeachment, just a highly partisan vote to try to impeach the president. That, to me, kicks off 2020 in a great way for the president.
He's such a sick freak, man. How many shirts do you have to wear? Yeah, I mean, I don't even understand. But this is, now they're saying, oh, it's a partisan vote on the part of the Democrats. First he says the Republicans are unified no matter what law breaking they saw, no matter what they heard, no matter what talking points the Putin wants to spill into the American ecosystem. They will do it. They will say it. They will say Adam Schiff is dirty. They will say whatever they need to say. They will say anything, everything, even though there was testimony by Fiona Hill that this was all Putin's propaganda to frame Ukraine for what they did, right? So Then on the back end of saying the Republicans will never react to facts as they find them, the Republicans have already made up their mind as to how they're going to vote, no matter what the facts show, no matter what the timeline, no matter what Zelensky actually said in public today. Yeah, what he said in public today, we're at war, you shouldn't make backroom deals, you shouldn't go behind our back. Why are you withholding aid? That's just, why do you say we're corrupt? That hurts us so bad. But the Republicans don't care. But somehow this is a Democratic plot. Somehow the Democrats who are upholding the law are the problem.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Remember this?
This is a fictional narrative that has been perpetrated and propagated by the Russian security services themselves.
They gave the server to CrowdStrike or whatever it's called, which is a company owned by a very wealthy Ukrainian. And I still want to see that server. You know, the FBI has never gotten that server. That's a big part of this whole thing.
Senator Kennedy, who do you believe was responsible for hacking the DNC and Clinton campaign computers, their emails? Was it Russia or Ukraine?
I don't know.
Oh, my
Nor
God.
do you, nor do any of us. Ms. Hill,
well, I mean, let me just interrupt to say the entire intelligence community says it was Russia.
Right, but it could also be Ukraine.
All right, so that was last weekend, right? And then he had to walk it back on. Now, I was showing you that last week, and I said to you, it depends where he's sitting as to where he stands, right? So he was sitting on Fox News Sunday when he said, I don't know, neither do you, confronted with the fact that every intelligence, all 17 intelligence agencies concluded that Russia was so sloppy that they had, Fancy Bear, Cozy Bear, all that they had hacked before, and they left the same exact codes, and it was easily understood who did it. Then he went on CNN. And on CNN, he says he's wrong, right?
Do you really believe that it wasn't Russia?
I did an interview yesterday with Chris Wallace, damn good reporter. I was answering one of his questions, and he interjected a statement and asked me to react to it. What I heard Chris say was, he made the statement that only Russia had tried to interfere in the election. And I answered the question. That's not what he said. I went back and looked at the transcript. He said only Russia tried to hack the DNC computer. Now, Chris is right. I was wrong. The only evidence I have, and I think it's overwhelming, is that it was Russia who tried to hack the DNC computer.
Okay. Now he goes on Meet the Press on NBC yesterday.
Were you briefed by the intelligence? According to the New York Times a couple weeks ago, U.S. senators were briefed after Fiona Hill's testimony that actually this entire effort to frame Ukraine for the Russian meddling of 2016, of which you just made this case that they've done it, that actually this is an effort of Russia propaganda, that this is a Russian intelligence propaganda campaign in order to get people like you to say these things about Ukraine. They're trying to frame Ukraine. You apparently were briefed about this in the United States Senate by intelligence officials. Are you at all concerned you're doing Russian intelligence work here?
I was not briefed.
You didn't attend that briefing?
And listen, Dr.
You didn't attend the briefing on that?
And Dr.
Okay.
I wasn't briefed. Dr. Hill is entitled to her opinion.
Oh my God!
But when the Economist magazine,
when does opinion become fact? Does 17 intelligence services saying it? Does every Western intelligence ally saying Russia did this? I'm just sort of confused. At what point is it no longer an opinion for you?
I don't think it's an opinion. I think it's a fact. I believe the reporting by the Politico magazine.
You just said Fiona Hill.
By the
you just said Fiona Hill gave an opinion.
I believe the report. I believe the reporting by the Financial Times. I believe the reporting by the Washington Examiner. You should read the articles, Chuck. They're very well documented. And I believe that a Ukrainian district court in December of 2018 slapped down several Ukrainian officials for meddling in our election as a violation of Ukrainian law. Now, I didn't report those facts.
Okay, and nobody reported those facts. What was reported was that the Black Ledger release that was given to the United States, the release of the Black Ledger, which was found by protesters who ran Viktor Yanukovych out of the country, showed illicit payments to Paul Manafort. And that ledger was made public, and the Ukrainians slapped down the prosecutor who under Poroshenko, who made that Black Ledger public, causing Paul Manafort to be exposed and finally prosecuted. And they said maybe they should have sat on it until after the U.S. election. That was the full extent of what the Ukrainians did. The Russian intelligence officers were conveying all kinds of dirty information to prominent Russians, to Ukrainians who were loyal to Putin, like Yanukovych, okay, who then used a range of intermediaries like oligarchs, like Oleg Deripaska, for instance, and businessmen and their associates to pass the material on to American political figures and even some journalists. When these articles were leaked to the information was leaked to the American press, they did not know the origin of the propaganda, and now they do. And so everybody that had ever written anything, including a Ukrainian politician who wrote a whole article about how they were trying to fix corruption and blah, 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 and just mentioned that Donald Trump was probably more corrupt than Hillary Clinton, he was told, stop it, just stop it. And all he did was write an op-ed, and that's it. But this propaganda machine that Russia had going on, this GRU machine, this Russian intelligence operation, it made it into the American ecosystem, and it sloshed around until it reached Donald Trump's ears. And then in Helsinki, when Donald Trump stood on the stage and said, I don't see any reason why it was Putin. I don't see why he would have done it. And people were just shocked and sickened by it, because at that point, the intelligence agencies had found that it was Russia. Then in the July 25th call with Zelensky, he brings it up again, and everybody goes, you know, this man is nuts, okay? Because he said, I would like you to do us a favor. I would like you to find out what happened with the whole situation with Ukraine. Well, Russia wants Ukraine to be framed for what Russia did. Now, if there's any question in your mind about if Russia is a good actor in the world or a bad actor in the world, can we just remember that Russia downed a passenger jet over Ukraine in 2014? Can we also remember that Russia poisoned Skripal and his daughter, Julia? Can we also remember that he used polonium to, poison a guy who went rogue in the KGB? I mean, this is craziness. This is absolute mass madness. And there is Senator John Kennedy, who, by the way, thought a really good way to spend the 4th of July would be in Russia with Putin. There he is on the TV saying, we don't know who did it. I was wrong to say it was Ukraine. I have no evidence that it was Ukraine. I know it was Russia. I believe the intel. And then again, yesterday, saying we don't know, and it could be Ukraine, and there were some articles that were written years ago. And he was actually confronted. He was like, why are you doing what Putin wants? Why are you doing this? And he has no good answer for it, and that's suspicious.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Now, come on. I mean, I got to put up, you realize the only other person selling this argument outside the United States is this man, Vladimir Putin. This is what he said on November 20th. Thank God nobody is accusing us anymore of interfering in U.S. elections. Now they're accusing Ukraine. Well, let them sort this out among themselves. You just accused a former president of Ukraine. You've done exactly what the Russian operation is trying to get American politicians to do. Are you at all concerned that you've been duped?
No, because you just read the articles. Do you believe The Economist magazine is a reputable journal? It's been around, I think, since 1843.
Do you think there's a difference in criticizing? Do you think there's a difference in a country criticizing a presidential candidate who essentially endorsed another country's invasion and annexation of a part of their country as equivalent to what Russia did with the DNC?
Well, let me put it this way, Chuck. Let's suppose, and I don't believe it, but you're right, and I'm wrong. Then what harm would it do to allow the President of the United States, who has a demonstrated record fighting foreign corruption, to introduce evidence?
Why doesn't he?
What harm would it do?
He has been provided every opportunity to provide exculpatory evidence on any of this, and they have chosen not to.
No, he hasn't.
Yes, he has.
No, he hasn't.
Yes, he has.
Rounds 1 and 2 by Speaker Pelosi and Chairman Schiff are as rigged as a carnival ring toss, and we both know that.
Oh, my God.
If I were a prosecutor and I were prosecuting you for a felony, and I went to a federal judge and I said, Judge, we both know Chuck's guilty, so let me call witnesses. Give me an order that he can't call any witnesses. He can't cross-examine my witnesses. He can't offer any rebuttal evidence. His lawyer can't even be there. You know what that federal judge would do?
Right. Well, that wasn't the trial. You're going to get a trial.
He'd either put me in handcuffs or he'd put me in a straitjacket because I'd be sanctioned.
This White
and that's
House,
what's happened here.
Senator, this White House has not cooperated on any oversight at all. Have they not brought some of this upon themselves?
Have they allowed the president to call his own witnesses?
Yes.
No. Have they allowed him to have his lawyer present? No. Have they allowed him to offer rebuttal evidence? No. Have they allowed him to cross-examine the witnesses that were handpicked by Speaker Pelosi? No.
Okay. Has the president allowed Mick Mulvaney to testify? No. Has the president allowed Mike Pompeo to testify? No. Has the president allowed John Bolton to testify? No. Has the president been allowed to call witnesses? Yes. Sondland and Volker were Donald Trump's handpicked witnesses. Those witnesses were asked for by Devin Nunes on behalf of Donald Trump. They thought that, where's Rudy Giuliani? Why won't President Trump let Rudy Giuliani, who's a civilian, testify? If nothing, he's done nothing wrong. Now, obviously, on Wednesday, there is a hearing, and the president is allowed to send his lawyers. The president is allowed to come if he wants to. The president was allowed to come to the other hearing that we had last week with all those witnesses. President could have shown up anytime, sat in the chair, gotten sworn. President wouldn't even talk to Bob Mueller, even though he was telling all of us he would love to sit down with Mueller. Well, he didn't, and he didn't want to, because the president is guilty of sin. And so the president then he agreed to answer questions in writing, and the testimony from Mueller was that he was mostly not credible in his written answers either, meaning he lied, he perjured himself under oath. So let's not attack the process any longer. Nobody is attacking any of the facts in this case. Nobody can attack the facts in this case because the facts in this case clearly, as revealed by Mick Mulvaney from a public podium, as revealed by Donald Trump in a transcript of a partial transcript of a phone call, is devastating. It's absolutely a quid pro quo. The testimony from the Trump witnesses, Sondland and Volker, was that it was a quid pro quo. They said those words. They said them out loud. There was a shakedown of Ukraine. They were part of it. They were ordered to work with Rudy Giuliani by the president. The president denies that he asked Rudy Giuliani to do anything for him. President denies that he even knows Sondland, right? Gordon Sondland is an unknown person to the president, although the president has 20 different phone calls with Gordon Sondland during this period of time. But he doesn't know Gordon Sondland. And Gordon Sondland also gave $1 million to to Donald Trump's inaugural committee. And then he became ambassador to the EU. Well, last we checked, Ukraine was not part of the EU, but Donald Trump put his shadow diplomacy team in place, and that included Sondland and Volker and Rudy Giuliani and Rick Perry. Where is Rick Perry? If there is exculpatory evidence, if there is evidence that will set Trump free, why doesn't he allow these witnesses to testify on his behalf? Because they will tell the truth. That's why. Bolton will eventually tell the truth. He's just waiting for this PR buildup for his book, and he wants to sell more copies than Junior did. You know, Junior's book is being bought by conservative, organizations as a premium. So if you gave to, this Heritage Foundation or to, Freedom Fighter or whatever, then you get a free book. Because they bought all Donald Trump's books. They bought them in bulk, which is their little shenanigans they game. But that said, here's Gordon Sondland.
These emails show that the leadership of the State Department, the National Security Council, and the White House were all informed about the Ukraine efforts from May 23rd, 2019 until the security aid was released on September 11th, 2019. I will quote from some of those messages with you shortly. Fourth, as I testified previously, Mr. Giuliani's requests were a quid pro quo for arranging a White House visit for President Zelensky. Mr. Giuliani demanded that Ukraine make a public statement announcing the investigations of the 2016 election, DNC server, and Burisma.
All right, quid pro quo, Mr. Giuliani, ordered by the president, insert yourself, create shadow diplomacy, shake down Ukraine. We need an announcement that they're going to investigate the Bidens. We need an announcement that they got the CrowdStrike server, which is just crazy because it's in the basement of the DNC in Washington, D.C., right? All this. And Senator Kennedy sits on the TV and says exactly what Putin wants said and what wants injected into the U.S. ecosystem. What the propaganda. Now, Putin is a pro at disinformation campaigns. He's been doing it for Russia has been doing disinformation campaigns for 70 years. This is not new. Vladimir Putin was a colonel in the KGB. He is trained in deception, and he trained our president to do exactly what he says to do in order to deceive his own people. This is Putin's stock and trade, and Trump is a fraud, and he has no problem doing it. And apparently, John Neely Kennedy, the senator, and Representative Doug Collins, and Representative McClintock, and half of the Nunes, they're all guilty of sin.
But if the courts rule in the future that senior officials like John Bolton, Mick Mulvaney could testify, do you believe they should?
Absolutely. And in fact, again, I think it would be to the president's advantage to have him testify now. But of course, he has to weigh that against the enormous catastrophic damage that would do to the doctrine of executive privilege that assures that when policy is being developed within the administration, those discussions are unfettered, are candid, are thinking outside of the box. That's why the doctrine of executive privilege exists.
He has not invoked executive privilege. Okay? The president of the United States did not invoke executive privilege, and Mulvaney can't invoke executive privilege because Mulvaney went to a podium and said, yeah, we do this all the time. Politics is part of our foreign policy. Get used to it. There is no executive privilege. Same with Don McGahn. The courts ruled Don McGahn has to testify. Former White House counsel Don McGahn has to testify. Don McGahn, they're going to say, oh, executive privilege. Don McGahn already sat down with Bob Mueller. His name is all throughout the Mueller report as being a cooperative witness and showing everything and telling everything. Don McGahn has already been questioned. You can't answer questions and then go back and say, oh, I can't answer the questions that I already answered because of executive privilege, because that's just stupid. It's the same with the Fifth Amendment, okay? You can invoke the Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate yourself, but you can't answer any questions after that. If you answer any questions after that, you've lost your protection under the Fifth Amendment. It's the same. An executive privilege, by the way, can only be invoked by the President of the United States, not by Mulvaney, not by Pompeo, not by Giuliani, not by Bolton, not by anybody. Only the President who has chosen not to do it.
Clear. Mary had a little the fault.
We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
You remember this in Minnesota a couple weeks ago?
Peter Strzok. Remember, he and his lover, Lisa Page. What a group. She's going to win. 10 million to 1. She's going to win. I'm telling you, Peter. I'm telling you, Peter, she's going to win. Peter, oh, I love you so much. I love you, Peter. I love you too, Lisa. Lisa, I love you. Lisa. Lisa. Oh, God, I love you, Lisa. And if she doesn't win, Lisa, we've got an insurance policy, Lisa. We'll get that son of a out. We got an insurance policy.
So that apparently was the breaking point for Lisa Page, okay? Lisa Page gave an interview to, I guess, the Daily Beast. She just couldn't take it anymore. And so she said, I'm done being quiet. She called Donald Trump's attacks at that rally sickening and said that she chose to speak out after the president did this lewd impression of her in Minnesota with Peter Strzok, an FBI agent with whom she had an affair. She said, quote, I had stayed quiet for years hoping it would fade away, but instead it got worse. It had been so hard not to defend myself, to let people who hate me control the narrative. I decided to take my power back. It's like being punched in the gut. My heart drops to my stomach when I realize he tweeted about me again. The president of the United States is calling me names to the entire world. He's demeaning me. He's demeaning my career. And it's sickening. So she sat down and she gave an interview and she explained that the IG report that is coming out, the Michael Horowitz report, which, by the way, in the New York Times, there's a story from a couple days ago that says, quote, this is how the story opens, the Justice Department's Inspector General found no evidence that the FBI attempted to place undercover agents or informants inside Donald J. Trump's campaign in 2016 as FBI agents investigated whether his associates conspired with Russia's election interference operation. So this IG report, remember Bill Barr was saying, oh, I think he was spied on. Oh, yeah, I do. I think he was spied on. And I've ordered, John Durham, the U.S. attorney in Connecticut, to open up another investigation and to prove that there was spying. And the IG, Michael Horowitz, is going to come out with his report, and you're going to see that it was Page and Strzok and Nellie Orr and her husband Bruce Orr, and they were all conspiring again. None of that was demonstrably true. None of it will be an IG Horowitz report. In fact, IG Horowitz report, and this is an Inspector General's report where, I mean, one bad email and you're going to hear about it. You know, one typo in an application and you're going to hear about it. And apparently the only thing that Michael Horowitz's IG report on how the investigation, the counterintelligence investigation into Russia, not Trump, into Russia began is the same as we always knew. And that was George Papadopoulos had a meeting with a Russian intelligence asset named Professor Mifsud, and sat down with him in London, and Mifsud filled his head with junk and garbage about that the Russians had all these emails on Hillary Clinton, and that they were going to continue to hack and blah, blah. And Papadopoulos got drunk and had another dinner with an Australian diplomat and told him that he had a meeting with this professor. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Mifsud was in Italy. So he had this meeting with this professor in Italy, and then in London he met with the ambassador from Australia and told the ambassador from Australia, who's part of our Five Eyes intelligence operations, meaning 5 countries share intelligence with the United States and we share ours with them. Australia is one of them. And so the Australian diplomat contacted our FBI and said, you know, there's this guy named Papadopoulos that is running around saying he met with an Italian professor who we think is a Russian intelligence officer. And that intelligence officer from Russia, from the GRU, told Papadopoulos that the Russians were hacking and that they had gotten Hillary Clinton's emails. And we thought you should know. And so that started the counterintelligence investigation. Carter Page, nobody was wiretapped, nobody was spied on. Carter Page had also been on the FBI's radar as being a person who could be loyal to Russia because of business opportunities he felt he had over there. But when, and this is so important, when Carter Page left the Trump campaign, when Carter Page left the Trump campaign, the FBI asked for a FISA warrant, a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Authorization warrant, after he left. And it was given to the FBI as part of their counterintelligence investigation into Russia. They never once looked at the Trump campaign. They never once looked at the Trump organization. They never looked at the Trump Foundation. They never looked at anything with Trump's name on it, ever. Carter Page's third FISA warrant renewal, that FISA warrant was renewed 3 times. During the third application, and you know, FISA warrant application is like this thick, okay? It's about the size of the phone book of New York City. It's gigantic. It's probably 1,000 pages, maybe more, a FISA warrant application. So the third renewal, a low-level FBI lawyer said he had some information in an email that he could provide to the court that went with the application. He couldn't produce the email. IG Horowitz is going to cite him as being less than, proper in his, representation of having this email. And that is all that he will find. That is all that he will find. He will not find that Lisa Page violated the law or had an insurance policy against Trump. In fact, what he will find is that Strzok and Page had some information about Carter Page and George Papadopoulos, and maybe even, Paul Manafort and Michael Flynn, and never made it public, even though the campaign had ended up being almost tied between Hillary and Trump toward the end. September, October, November, almost tied. Never said a word, never released any information, never did anything to tip the scales, never did anything to hurt Donald Trump, never did anything to help Hillary Clinton. Nothing. So Lisa Page finally said today, while it would be nice to have the IG confirm publicly that my personal opinions had absolutely no bearing on the course of the Russia investigations, I don't kid myself that fact will matter very much to a lot of people. She said the president has a very loud megaphone and nobody's going to believe her. She said it's also very intimidating because he is still the president of the United States. And when the president of the United States accuses you of treason by name, despite the fact that I know there's no fathomable way that I have committed any crime at all, let alone treason, he's still somebody who is actually in a position to do something about that, to try to further destroy my life. It never goes away. It never stops, even when he's not publicly attacking me. Now, you got to know that there was another investigation in 2018 a previous IG investigation last year that also looked at this and said they did not let their political views affect their decision-making in the investigation. And it still hasn't gone away. And he's going to do this all over again. He just did it in Minnesota. She said she had it, and she needed to defend herself from accusations of treason.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Now, what exactly is wrong with Bill Barr?
I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. I'm not suggesting that those rules were violated, but I think it's important to look at that. And I'm not talking about the FBI necessarily, but intelligence agencies more broadly.
So you're not suggesting, though, that spying occurred?
I don't. I guess you could. I think spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur.
What is wrong with that man? And that is our Attorney General of the United States. There is no spying on the president's campaign. There was no spying on the Trump organization. There was no spying on anybody at all. Okay, Carter Page had left the campaign. Carter Page had been on the radar of the FBI for a very long time. Papadopoulos was dumb. He got drunk. He's talked to an ambassador from Australia who alerted our intelligence agencies that there was information given to him by a Russian intelligence operative who was in the United States. You know, Professor Misfud or whatever. He was in the United States and somebody tipped him off and he fled the United States. And now we can't find him. We can't talk to him. We don't know, except Mueller's report says that Misfud was a Russian intelligence operative who was telling Papadopoulos to tell the Trump campaign, we got this. We got so much dirt on Hillary Clinton. We got emails. We got Podesta's email. We got all kinds of crap. And we want Trump, and Trump welcomed it, right? That we know after the fact. But nobody spied on Carter Page. Nobody spied on Papadopoulos. What happened to Papadopoulos was, after the fact, he was called in to testify and he lied. He lied about his meetings. He lied about Misfud. He lied about the Australian ambassador. And he went to jail for 12 big days. Now he's running for office, this man who lied to cover himself. Carter Page, he left the campaign. And that's when they went to the FISA court and said, this guy's no longer associated with the Trump campaign. We got issues with him. We think that he is, a guy who will do the bidding of Vladimir Putin for business opportunities. We need to figure that. So 3 times, the FISA warrants are only good for what? I think 90 days. And 3 times the FISA warrants were renewed. On the 3rd time, a low-level FBI lawyer represented he had an email or some such thing. I don't even know what it is yet, and we won't know till the IG report comes out. And he couldn't produce the email, and that was unprofessional. 3rd renewal. I mean, this is just, look, the findings in Mr. Horowitz's report is that there is no evidence that the FBI attempted to place any undercover agent or informant inside the campaign. Agents were investigating Russia, not Donald Trump, and that the FBI did not act improperly, that the FBI was not politically motivated, that there was no secret wiretap that was ordered on anybody in the Trump campaign, only Carter Page, and only after he left. This is pure fantasy. This is Putin's propaganda machine that Trump is all about. It's just so wrong and it's so sick. And it's just, I'll tell you, Charlie Dent, who left Congress in 2017. He just couldn't take it anymore. He's a Republican. Just couldn't take it anymore. And he says privately he's talking to members of the GOP. And secretly, these are cowards. These are pure cowards. Secretly, they're disgusted by what they have to do. Secretly, they're disgusted by Donald Trump. but they won't say anything out loud.
Well, I think my former colleagues are in a situation where they understand their base pressure. The base has not yet bolted from the president, and I think that's why they're standing with the president for the moment. But there's no question, having spoken to many of them privately, they are absolutely disgusted and exhausted by the president's behavior. They resent being put in this position all the time. I mean, just take, for example, when they tried to, remember how they tried to pivot from the Ukraine scandal a few weeks ago by pivoting to Doral, bringing the G7 there, moving from one corrupt act to another. I mean, those types of head-exploding moments are just, I think, infuriating these members, and I think they'd like to step out, but they just can't because of their base at the moment.
Yeah, and I think they can't step out because of Fox News at the moment. That's what I think. I swear to God, they tell you this, this thing about Republicans. Well, they're afraid that he'll tweet about them and ruin their. You know what? He lost the election in Alabama. He's been losing these very pivotal elections where he's gone and he's campaigned for a certain candidate and then they lose. And this is repeating itself over and over again in swing districts or in the Deep South even. I don't think that Republicans are afraid of being tweeted about at all. I think Republicans are afraid of Fox News viewers, okay? Because Fox News, even after this IG report, the Justice Department announced that the IG report found no wrongdoing at all on the part of the FBI with regard to the counterintelligence investigation that was opened up with James Comey, okay? No wrongdoing at all. It was not based on the Steele dossier, which they didn't have when they opened up a counterintelligence investigation. And the Steele dossier was like in a footnote, like much later on. This was all started because Papadopoulos talked to a Russian intelligence agent and told an Australian ambassador that Russia was hacking the United States election and that they had dirt on Hillary Clinton. And the Australians alerted the United States FBI. And a counterintelligence investigation, not a criminal investigation into anybody, but into Russia, was opened. And it was a valid, permitted endeavor by the FBI, okay? So now you turn on Fox News and you'll hear the exact opposite.
Okay, let's debunk these two things right away. This New York Times story, which addresses these 2 points, which is supposed to be some kind of effort to gaslight everyone and make you believe what happened didn't happen, actually says it happened. The New York Times story, if you read it, which most people didn't, they just read the headline, which is a Pravda-like propaganda effort, says no evidence of spying. It then goes on, if you read the story later on, to say how the FBI spied and put spies in the campaign. Now, it uses euphemisms in the euphemism game to call spies like, all kinds of fancy names like FBI employees, FBI informers. Guys, there's informers, there's spies in the common use of the language, and the New York Times story confirms it.
I mean, it's an alternate universe. I mean, exactly the opposite of what the IG report found, what the previous IG report found, the origins of the Mueller investigation, which, by the way, go back to the Comey investigation, and then Comey was fired, and that's how we got Robert Mueller, and that was the first time that Donald Trump himself or his campaign was ever looked at for obstruction of justice, because he fired James Comey, that idiot. Prior, this was a counterintelligence investigation into Russian hacking. Mr. Horowitz found no evidence that anybody tried to infiltrate the Trump campaign.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Oh, Brett, she's back. Here's your girl, Sarah, on the Fox News. Lying. More.
To me, it's not surprising at all, because we knew all along that there was no scandal here, that it was a complete sham that was, dreamt up by Adam Schiff, another hoax. He failed with the Russian hoax, and so now he came up with this big process to try to distract America from all the good things that the president is doing.
Like what?
It's no surprise that after 2 weeks of hearing all of their star witnesses admit not to witnessing anything, that this thing has completely tanked and that people are sick and tired of watching it. They want Congress to actually get something done. They want them to be productive. They'd love to see things like USMCA passed and, talk about infrastructure or drug pricing or anything that actually helps impact the country. And yet instead of doing that, you can see that the Democrats have no plan, no vision, no solutions, and all they can do is attack this president, and people are paying attention to that, and the numbers are reflecting it.
Okay, Sarah, there are 250 pieces of legislation sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk in the Senate. And some of them are H.R. 1 to get money out of elections and paper ballot backups, H.R. 8, which is a gun safety measure. Then there's the prescription drug price, bill that actually requires the Medicare program to negotiate with Big Pharma to get the cost of prescription drugs down. There's an infrastructure package. What is wrong with this network? How do they sit there and do this and sleep at night? I don't understand. They sell out their country day in, day out for this fraud, this fraudulent, obese, disgusting, lying sack who somehow managed to convince America that he was not a one-man swamp. Speaking of swamp, I have to tell you, so one of the weekend shows, okay, this is like the sickest weekend show that they have on the Fox News channel. Steve Hilton, he's like a English guy that opines about, American values. And actually, he admitted on his show that Rudy Giuliani and some of these other guys, like John Solomon at The Hill and Victoria Tensing and Joe DeGeneva, who are representing a Russian criminal named Victor Firtash, and also, part of this conspiracy to defraud the United States, that they are part of a swamp. And then all of a sudden, Rudy Giuliani today piped up and said he was going to sue Fox News and Steve Hilton for this.
There is another swamp here, okay? And we have to be honest with ourselves and with our audience and with everyone here, which is that there's a swamp going on with the commercial interests of Rudy Giuliani, Joe DeGeneva, Victoria Tensing, John Solomon's involved now. I know he's a Fox News contributor. He's done some great reporting on this. But there is another side to this swamp.
Are
and
you saying that Rudy Giuliani is a part of the swamp?
On this, yes, because what's he doing? He's going around trying to make business deals out of the Ukraine situation at the same time as acting for his client, President Trump. He's trying to make money off of his relationship with President Trump. I don't like that.
I do want always corruption.
So now Rudy Giuliani is considering filing a lawsuit against the weekend host Steve Hilton on the Fox News Network because he veered off script, which is to defend the orange one no matter what he does. Whether he's enriching himself, whether he's renting out entire floors of his hotel in Washington to the Saudi royal family while they're murdering journalists, not just murdering, dismembering. So, this is unbelievable. So here we are, everybody. Here we are. And tonight at 6 o'clock, about an hour and a half from now, we will get the first glimpse at the Schiff Ukraine report. Tomorrow, the House will vote on whether or not to endorse and accept that report as the report. And then Wednesday, we will have legal scholars come in and testify based on the reporting, based on the witness testimony. What is a high crime? What is a misdemeanor? What is impeachable? So they just released the witness list. It will be called Constitutional Grounds for Presidential Impeachment. The witnesses will be Noah Feldman. If you've never heard of Noah Feldman, he is a Felix Frankfurter professor of law. That is, Felix Frankfurter was a Supreme Court justice and one of the great ones. This is at Harvard Law School. Pam Carlin, she's a professor of public interest law and co-director of the Supreme Court Litigation Stanford Law School. Michael Gerhardt, who is from the University of North Carolina School of Law. He is the Burton Craig Distinguished Professor of Jurisprudence. And somebody that we all know, I think, in the Randi Rhodes Show wheelhouse, Jonathan Turley, who is a libertarian, and he teaches public interest law at George Washington School of Law, George Washington University School of Law, which is, if I had my you know, if I had my life to do over again, I would have made sure that's where I went. Okay, and so that'll be at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning. Those will be the 4 legal scholars. And I just want you to know, Turley is probably anti-impeachment. Yes. Right. So it should be fascinating. All right, Patty in Portland.
Hi, Randy.
Hi, Patty.
Sure do love you and your crew.
Thank you.
I've been wanting to ask you this for a while, and shout out to the chat room also. And with you're such a brainiac, Randy, and I appreciate you so much. And what do you think Trump and the Republicans' bottom line is in all of this? I just don't get it.
All right, so
the Republicans know they're lying.
Yeah, they do.
And they're not as stupid as they pretend to be. Trump is a clear and present danger to this country, and they know it. He's destroying us. And unless they are planning on changing the whole system and bringing us all down, I don't understand where they are going with this. This is more than just keeping their seats, because he's destroying us. They know he's a maniac behind closed doors. They see he's a maniac in public and everywhere he goes. He doesn't know what he's doing. He shouldn't be there. What do you think, my brilliant Randi Rhodes? What do you think their bottom line is? What are they going to get out of this?
So the bottom line for them is video, and the bottom line for them would be audio tapes, just like Nixon, right? I mean, you have to remember the Republicans stood by Richard Nixon the whole time until, I guess his name was Richard Butterfield, testified that there was a taping system in the White House and that there were tapes of Richard Nixon ordering the break-in, right? Ordering a crime. Now, the House Intelligence Committee is in possession of audio and video recordings and photographs that were provided to them by Lev Parnas. The problem is, Lev Parnas is also under indictment for funneling foreign money into the campaign. The Republicans are probably the recipients of a lot of this foreign money that was laundered through things like Lev Parnas and this fake energy company he had, and the NRA. But unless and until audio and videotape appears where Americans can hear and see for themselves, they're going to go down this bad road with Donald Trump.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
What's the biggest question left in your mind ahead of the beginning of your hearings?
We got the best evidence at the very beginning. The "do me a favor, though" phone call. And the question is, should that misconduct result in impeachment?
And what about testimony from the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani,
Yeah,
who
what about
Gordon
it?
Sondland said was in the loop on everything? Should he testify?
More information is better than less in every aspect. My objection to what the Congress has done is it is impeded that process by vetoing Republican witnesses.
We don't work for this president or any president. We work for the American people. We do have a constitutional responsibility to serve as a check and balance on a potentially out-of-control executive branch. That is not the Democratic Party playbook.
Have you gotten any indication the White House will be involved, or the council?
We have not.
What harm would it do to allow the President of the United States, who has a demonstrated record fighting foreign corruption, to introduce evidence?
Why doesn't he?
Yeah. What harm would
He has been provided every opportunity to provide exculpatory evidence on any of this, and they have chosen not to.
No, he hasn't. No, he hasn't.
You don't want to allow the administration to play rope-a-dope with the courts and have this delayed and delayed and delayed.
The most valuable witness that we have is the President of the United States himself. When President Zelensky on July 25th, on the infamous call, mentioned the fact that he was about ready to purchase additional weaponry. President Trump responded, "But I need you to do me a favor, though." None of the witnesses that we've talked to who have been directly involved or not were able to give any reasonable, rational explanation for holding up the military aid.
That's a fact. Nobody could explain it. Nobody understood it. Nobody could, come. Mick Mulvaney at OMB, he would be a good witness if the president did nothing wrong, right? Because that's where the money got held up. Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, he would be a good witness if he, could testify that the president did nothing wrong. John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, he would be a great witness. And Rudy Giuliani, who's very busy suing Fox News weekend hosts. Why doesn't he testify if there's no wrongdoing here? See what I mean? The president has had every opportunity for witnesses of his preference. The president of the United States himself could have, asked the House of Representatives to hear from him. Every single member of the Intelligence Committee sat there and said, President is more than welcome to come and sit down and get sworn and tell his side of the story. Mick Mulvaney, he's more than welcome to come and get sworn, tell his side of the story. John Bolton is more than welcome to come and get sworn. Mick Mulvaney, more than welcome. Giuliani, let him come. I mean, you had Lindsey Graham saying, I'm going to call Rudy Giuliani. Nobody ever did. Isn't that something? Nobody ever did. Everybody's in court fight. Don McGahn. It just depends on what the court says. The court says you have to testify. You can't defy a congressional subpoena. That's called obstruction of Congress. Okay? Can't do it. Well, the president, executive privilege. No, you already answered the questions. So did Mick Mulvaney in public at a podium. Okay. And once you've answered the questions, you can't say, I can't answer the question.
And we knew that money either had to go out the door by the end of September or we had to have a really, really good reason not to do it. And that was the legality of the issue.
But to be clear, what you just described is a quid pro quo. It is funding will not flow unless the investigation into the Democratic server happen as well.
We do that all the time.
Now he can't say, I can't answer what happened. Because he already answered. We do that all the time. Get used to it. We're corrupt. Oh, well. You see what I mean? And the only person, again, that can exert executive privilege is the president of the United States, and he doesn't do it. Why? Because he likes to torture these people. He keeps them hanging. He keeps them dangling, right? Because if they don't cooperate, and he hasn't, then maybe he'll pardon them in the end. It's and listen, when all this falls apart, and it will, because this is such corruption, this is mega corruption, massive corruption. When this all fails, the Republican Party is done. They are done. There will be no Republican Party. Everything that they ever told you about deficits, and they're concerned about it, and, pull yourself up from your bootstraps while giving, welfare to farmers who don't even want it. They would rather keep their markets in China. They would rather keep, their soybeans flowing and do real business. But oh no, Donald Trump would rather give them everything they ever said about government dependence, everything they ever said about, a free market. Obviously, there's no coal industry, not because of any legislation. President Trump has done everything to give the coal industry a free pass to throw coal ash in your swimming pool wherever it wants, whenever it wants, to put mercury in the water, to put, lead in your water. Anything and everything industry ever wanted, and they still can't make a go of it. They still declare bankruptcy. Why? Because their free market has said coal is too expensive. Natural gas is the future. And who's got natural gas? Russia. Chris in Rochester.
Hey, Randy.
Hi.
Hope you had a good Thanksgiving.
Oh, it was unbelievable.
The thoughts in my head are, how the hell are we going to put this country back together again? I feel like I'm in the movie Exorcist, and we're all dressed up as the priest going, the power of truth compels you. It's just like watching this thing raise above the bed, and we just have to keep sticking to it. as the slop comes out of these people.
Well, I'll tell you what would unify this country. I'll tell you exactly what, okay? You get a Democratic president, keep the House, add a couple of, what do we need, like 4 seats in the Senate? And all of a sudden, we do health care reform, and all of a sudden, we raise the federal minimum wage, and all of a sudden, we do a real infrastructure project, and everybody feels really good and realizes, oh, damn, there really were 250 pieces of legislation sitting in Mitch McConnell's graveyard. I will never do that again. That's what would bring the country together. Can you imagine? All of a sudden, federal minimum wage is raised. All of a sudden, it's December. It's like the second day in December. I got to pay my health care premium, okay? $2,069. I mean,
Jesus.
Right. So honest to God, man, wouldn't it be something if Democrats got elected and all of a sudden there's at least an option to buy into Medicare? Oh, my God. Can you imagine how much money would be freed up to support this economy and how much consumerism there would be and what the GDP of this country, which 70% of all GDP is consumerism. Can you imagine?
I worry about the debt crisis of people who are going to debt to buy stuff, and they really can't afford it.
Who is the only president in modern history who actually created 22 million jobs and zeroed out the debt and deficit? Who?
Barack Obama.
No, Bill Clinton.
Who?
Bill Clinton.
Oh, 8 million. How many was Obama? 8 million?
I don't know, but 22 is Bill Clinton.
I'll take your numbers.
And zero. I mean, we had a debt clock, and it turned off because we didn't know. We didn't know. So, there is a way, and where there's a will, there's a way. But that's what brings this country together, is making things better for ordinary people who work every single day and just can't get ahead. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I do tax returns. I do returns for a lot of people that are poor, and a lot of times they can't pay me. I'm like, because I'm trying to keep them out of trouble. Because then they seize their bank accounts when they can't pay their taxes.
Yeah.
And, it's insane. And
it is insane. And yet you've got Amazon and GE and all these mega corporations that literally pay zero. Some of them actually get refunds. And here you got somebody making, $52,000 a year, just barely by the skin of their teeth. And they owe taxes at the end of the year?
Yeah, in New York State, they're treating, per diem nurses that the state pays under Medicaid and not paying them as employees. So then they got the Social Security taxes that they haven't paid in, and then they get banged $15,000, and they go, "How am I going to pay that?"
Yeah,
that puts patients at risk because the nurses are stressed out.
Yeah, no, it's all a bizarre flip of the way things ought to be for the people who built and will build and continue to work and support everything this country does, from making food.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. From making food to taking care of the seniors to taking care of children, teaching children. I mean, the only people that are doing well are hedge fund managers and speculators on Wall. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. And for some strange reason, the people who are hurting the worst, whose companies are declaring bankruptcy where there is no other industry, continue to support strong and wrong. No, what brings this country together is progress. What brings this country together is an increase in wages. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.